So Matt, now that the presidential election is over, are you ready for a real horror show?
Donald Trump's post-presidency tweets?
Nope.
A Joe Biden presidency?
Wrong again. We're talking about Friday the 13th in honor of its 40th anniversary.
I hate you.
I wouldn't say it started, but it definitely created the flavor of 80s slasher films, I definitely would say.
Before we get into it, let me just ask you a question.
How upset are you that you agreed to do this?
Well, I'm wearing a flannel shirt, just to kind of show some level of compassion. But
Matt, as a counselor, obviously a licensed counselor, I'm here to help you.
okay. We've known each other for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
What is it with you and slasher films?
So I know you don't like horror films in general, and I think slasher films in particular.
Kinds of horror films. I mean, we probably should preface it by just saying that. Like,
I don't know of a single horror film you like.
I like The Shining.
Okay, so when Stanley Kubrick makes a horror film, then you're okay with it.
Yeah.
Also released in 1980, same month as Friday the 13th, by the way,
I'm
came out a couple weeks after, and features a man cutting through a door with an axe. There was a similar scene in Friday the 13th in which Betsy Palmer is, breaking through a door.
I did notice that.
I'm just saying, I think Kubrick stole the idea from Sean Cunningham.
Be that as it may. I'm not entirely. It's my least, next to musicals, I guess, it's probably my least favorite genre of films. I just find horror films. It's not even so much like a moral objection, which I do have some moral objections to.
How do you have a moral objection to this movie?
I know what we can do. We're going to play Monopoly.
I hate Monopoly.
Not the way I play it, you don't.
What?
We're going to play strip Monopoly.
I just find them remarkably boring in general.
So here's the way I look at horror film, right? I think first of all, I'm always a fan of genre. And I think why I like genre, whatever the genre, I love genre as something to study because it's a philosophically interesting thing. If a movie is following a certain genre, you as the audience have certain understanding of what you're getting into, right? And so you have an idea of how this is supposed to work. The problem is then, philosophically speaking, right, you're trying to think of this from a film scholarship kind of perspective, is that you, the audience, should be bored and never want to see this. Once you know it, like you should just go, I've seen that before, I'm bored by it, and so I don't care about this anymore, I'm not going to watch it again, right? So genre kind of presents an interesting philosophical quandary because people like genre, and they find genre very interesting, and they keep going back and visiting it, right? Mm-hmm. And if you repeat it too closely, people start to go, yeah, this is boring, I've already seen this. You break away from it too much, people go, well, hang on, that's not true to what it's supposed to be, right? So I find horror films, like any other genre, just a fascinating thing to study from that perspective. So to me, a horror film is no different than if you're doing a biblical epic, or if you're doing a musical, or if you're doing...
Interesting you immediately jumped to biblical epic.
But I think, sometimes you can do a crossover, like The Passion of the Christ.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
But I think that, it's just that the idea of a genre to me is very fascinating, just from a philosophical point of view. Now, the horror genre in particular, I find a lot more interesting than maybe others because they're so often terrible. Right. I mean,
so that's the appeal to you, is how bad they are.
Well, it's the fact that because they're so often terrible, when you find one that works, you go, my goodness, why does this work? And it's like finding this wonderful treasure, right? And whether that's something like an old British film like The Innocents, which is a great haunted horror film, that's just a wonderful movie, right? But I look at slasher films as having within them the potential to really speak to some kind of very subconscious elements of our human person.
And I get that, but man, you have to go through a lot of crap to get to something that's
Yeah, you do.
worthwhile.
Yeah, I'm not going to deny that. I mean, that's fun. I mean, because I think so. This series, I'll just explain my fascination with it.
Yeah, probably should just get into film
So
at this point. Not to take too much of a detour. I just had to ask that question.
no, it's a fair question to ask, and I mean, I will be very grateful for you as a friend for having finally broken down and agreeing to do this this conversation because I know you don't like this movie. I think I showed it to you like 20 years ago, probably or close to it, and
yeah.
you were thoroughly unsatisfied, and here you
It's
are.
a terrible, terrible film.
And it is a terrible film, but I love it nonetheless. And I'm a fan of this. So if you look at 80s slasher films, I eat them up. I mean, they're like, to me, they are the cinematic equivalent of Arby's. It's just like, I know it's not good for me, but occasionally I just want to go and have an Arby's roast beef sandwich, right? And that's what these are, right? And I think there is a place for cinema to have that kind of thing. Not everything needs to be David Lean or Francis Ford Coppola, right? I think these have a place, and these films are so bad that they become very good. I mean, some of the sequels actually are kind of legitimately good on their own right. But the first one is, yeah, it's not a good movie. I don't deny it. But I find it fascinating how it spawned a genre. And I've just had such a long history of this particular movie. I can still remember the first time I saw it. I was a little kid. And these movies, I don't know if you had the same thing, but like growing up, my mom hated that I loved horror films.
Well,
She thought I was going to grow up and be a
parents-
psychopath, and she was wrong. I'm only a sociopath. So, but I mean, these movies were forbidden fruit. I think that's partly where my initial fascination came from.
That was very much the case for me, too. I mean, there's no question about that. But at the same time, I never felt much of a desire to watch them, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm just an outlier.
Well, I kind of like the idea of pushing that envelope for myself as I'm watching a movie. I want to have a movie challenge me. And so when I was a kid, I really wanted to be kind of going into that thing that I knew was going to maybe disturb me a little bit and challenge me a little bit.
I had some of that too, but for some reason I never really fell into this genre. I mean, I think of like one series of films, I guess, that kind of fell into that for me were the Jaws films, and especially the sequels. I remember when they came on TV, I kind of felt like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be watching this, but those are probably pretty tame compared
Well, I mean,
to...
I think those weren't like considered crass, right? The way this is. I mean, it might have been thought, oh, you as a little kid maybe shouldn't see that. But I love this movie though. It's one of my, I wouldn't say favorite because that sounds like I really like it as a. It's just one of the movies I find most fascinating.
Is it more of a nostalgia thing for you, or it's
Well,
actually intellectual appreciation?
There's
you have
two.
for it?
There's a nostalgia piece and there is an intellectual piece to it.
Okay.
For me, I mean, the nostalgia piece is the fact that I remember very clearly the first time I saw this. My parents, we had the way it was the house. We had a basement. We had the main level, and I remember this was going to be on, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna stay up late. I'm gonna try to outwit everybody here to watch Friday the 13th. It's gonna be on late at night. There's a TV in the basement. And so I just remember staying perfectly still in my bed, making them think I was asleep, and then waiting for them to go into their bedroom. And then eventually they did. And then I creeped out and I went around through the living room, through the kitchen, down the stairs to the basement to watch this movie.
You got away with it?
And I did, but barely, because I by the time I got into it, it was pretty far along in the movie, like, because they wouldn't go to bed. My parents were not cooperating with my brilliant scheme. And so the part that I came into is when our lead character, Alice, is sitting, she's discovering everything.
Is there a lead character in this movie?
Yes, there is a lead character in this movie,
Okay.
Matthew. So Alice is our last woman.
It's not just fodder.
And so she's discovering the dead bodies. that's the part like I kind of came in. I mean, I came in slightly
That's
before
pretty
that.
late in the film.
Yeah, I was. Oh yeah, like I said, I almost missed the whole movie, and that's the only part I saw. And I was like, "Oh no, I'm in too deep. I don't know what to do." I was probably like 6 years old. I have no idea how old I was, but I was like, "I'm in too deep. I don't know what to do. I'm really scared. I'm in this basement and it's all dark, and I got to get up and I can't put lights on. And I don't know how to get out of this." So I was, and I don't dare run because they'll hear me running to get back into my room. So I was just like, I had no idea how to get out of this situation. So I had that fun experience with it. But then years went by, I never watched it again. And it was in high school, and a good friend of mine, Luke McClure, who you've met.
Yeah.
So Luke and I were just looking to waste away a Friday night, and we just thought, let's go get some old crappy horror movies. And we rented a bunch of them. I can't remember all the other ones, but this was one of them that we rented that night. We watched it. I was like, this is awesome. So we got super into the series. We kept watching them, all of them, and just having a blast with them. So there's that. There's just like this long-standing joy of watching them and like making a point to get together every Friday the 13th and watch a couple of these movies and have fun with a friend, right?
Well, this is so different from what people traditionally think of in terms of Friday the 13th.
Yeah, because it's Jason, right? That's
Yeah.
what we knew, and
That character is not here.
yeah, he's referenced. He's dead.
Did you know that a young boy drowned the year before those two others were killed? The counselors weren't paying any attention. They were making love while that young boy drowned.
He has appearance in a dream, although I like
Or
to.
was it a dream?
Well, here's where I get really crazy into my whole Friday the 13th fan fiction sort of thing. Clearly, Betsy Palmer plays Mrs. Voorhees, and for a long time, as people know, that was like the idiot film buff who'd be like, actually, you know, Jason wasn't actually in the series until the second one. He didn't have the hockey mask until the third one. You know, I just want to let you know I know more about movies than you do. That's this thing that we used to do. But now everybody knows that, so nobody really does that anymore.
Yeah.
But Betsy Palmer, clearly the most unintimidating surprise reveal of a killer in the history of movies.
Well, I'm Mrs. Voorhees, an old friend of the Christies. No. Dear, now, look, I can't help you if you don't calm down.
And it's just completely preposterous that she'd be able to
Yeah.
to execute these murders.
So this is where my little fan fiction theory comes in, because when our first young person kill of Annie, who gets her throat slit in the woods, happens, it's clearly a man. I like to propose for all the Friday the 13th fans.
She just has man hands. Like
I'm
Seinfeld.
just no. I'm making a proposal. We'll see what the Friday the 13th fan club says. That's the first appearance of Jason Voorhees.
I'm sure someone else has probably thought of that.
No, it's first. I'm clearly the only person that could have ever made that association.
It is interesting that this is, you know, it's an independent film, right? I mean, this was made outside.
Released
the
by
studio
Paramount,
system.
but
yeah, it was
yeah.
acquired by them after a bidding war, and so it's interesting in that right that this is something that was really one of the early successful independent films.
I think what I like about this is because you go, man, there is a good movie in this if you just change the script around. You know,
Well, there really aren't characters in this movie.
well, you got Crazy Ralph. He's a character.
Goody camp blood, ain't you? God damn it, Ralph, get out of here. Go on, get. Leave people alone. You'll never come back again.
Okay, he's a kid. He's very funny. Like
I don't know if it's intentional or if it's meant to be actually. I have no idea how to
really
interpret
make
that.
me laugh though.
I have no idea how to interpret that character. Like, and his name's actually Crazy Ralph.
Yeah.
But you're all doomed. I genuinely think that that's
His
meant to
jugular
be.
veins are always popping up.
I genuinely think that's meant to be like the Greek chorus that's coming in and trying to warn you, right?
I doubt the thought was that sophisticated, but
I
it
think
functions
it
in
was.
that way,
I think it was. It's just so incompetent, you know. And that's the fun of this, because I think there is an idea in this film. I think it's often called, and even the writer and everybody has said, oh, it just was a cash in on Halloween. But I think there are a couple of things where no, they're trying to do something, or they just lack the ability to do it. And if you look at the screenplay, I mean, you think, okay, so it follows a little bit of the Halloween formula of a previous event, that results in death, and then flash forward to our current day. And the movie is set in the present, as it says very clearly up front. So everybody evidently in 2020 of this small little town of Crystal Lake is having a 80s retro phase, and they forgot they have cell phones. because I
Vehicles
just
too, yeah.
don't you just love it, the present.
It makes it timeless.
It is a timeless movie. I will not deny that.
You know, you're beautiful when you're angry, sweetheart.
What if you instead just switch the beginning, where you introduce Annie and you have it be like, oh, here's my protagonist, and then she gets killed unexpectedly as she's making her way to the camp. We didn't see that coming. Because by then you've already introduced that there's a killer that's killing people, and you know, so if you only started with her, it's like I get to introduce a character, I follow, then boom, she dies, and we go to the main credits, the opening credits. That's a much better opening. You go like, see, there's just small little adjustments like that. All you have to do is re-edit and rework a few little things. This movie becomes much more interesting, right? And I just feel like that's what is fascinating with this intellectually, is that you can see it with a little bit of tweaking of the script. Twerking in a Friday the 13th movie, kids.
That's what I needed.
That's what a new Friday the 13th remake would have, twerking. But just a little tweaking of that script, right? And how you structure it.
Yeah.
And then, okay, she's dead. And everyone's like, well, where's Annie? You know, we're waiting for her to come. You know, you got to get to the camp. And you're like, oh my God, there's going to be some sort of monstrous thing descending upon all these other people, and they don't know it yet.
Doesn't
But
that
we
feel
know
a little
it.
more conventional, though, to do it that way? I mean, doing it
but-
this way is almost more subversive, or
But that's the point of genre, what I was getting at earlier, right? If you follow genre closely, but with a couple little tweaks here and there, and a little bit of fun with it, that works and makes great genre pieces.
you're saying the formula still has to be
The
followed.
formula, I think, needs
to
to
a point.
exist, and then you find interesting variations and beats within that framework. You don't try to redefine the framework, right? And I don't think they were trying to redefine the framework. I think they're just genuinely incompetent.
Well, I think they knew what an audience going to this kind of film wanted to see, right? I mean,
Sex and blood. right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's
And
the whole. This is
ultimately
the
what it
Friday the
is,
13th
right?
part two, but I mean,
Yeah.
the body count continues. This franchise is nothing if not honest with itself about what it is.
Well, and there's kind of a, bludgeoning, stupid sort of simplicity to it conceptually, which I guess
Isn't that charming to you a
I
little bit?
admire its honesty in that regard. Yeah, but it still doesn't make me want to sit down and watch it, I guess. But I think I texted you at one point after watching this again, just saying, are we sure this isn't a comedy? Because, man, there are a lot of unintentionally funny moments, or maybe they are intentional.
Hello? Who's that? Oh, hi. What are you doing out in this mess?
In this movie.
no, I think they're
mean,
unintentional.
But there's there's an overall air of incompetence to the filmmaking. It's a lot of, wandering around in the woods. It's a lot. Again,
There's not a lot of wandering around in the woods. There's a lot of going about in the camp, right? And I do like. I guess this is
camp's
one
in the
thing.
woods.
Here's what I like about it. Still not wandering around in the woods, but what I like about this film, and this is just probably a product of when it's made, and being a low budget film too, is that it really is a camp. This is not some Hollywood camp, which
Yeah,
is
it's
what
a
you
real
get
place.
today. Where it's on a studio. This is really somewhere in New Jersey.
I do admire kind of the cobbled nature of the film and the gritty sort of independent spirit that was probably behind making this.
Matt, you're just trying to be nice. I know you don't admire anything. You
I'm
don't have to
gra-
try
I'm
to say.
grasping at
You don't have to
straws
say
here,
you
man.
like it. You can.
No,
you can,
I'm not saying I like it because I don't. But I mean, there are things that.
You're such a
Screw it.
kind soul. You're trying to say nice things.
I'm attempting, but it's a stretch. It's a stretch. for me.
See, here's what I think is cool about this movie, is that it's so one of the more famous things that people talk about is this is Kevin Bacon in a very early role.
Sure.
And that character of Jack and his girlfriend Marcy, right? They obviously are like that's the romantic couple, and they have the sex scene, and there's a little bit of nudity, so it's all, you can see how that's all there for the audience and for what you're looking for this kind of movie. But then they introduce just a little bit of depth in there Don't roll your eyes at me, Matt. Okay, they do add a little bit of depth in there because you can see that they're having this dream. She's talking about a dream, like the storm's coming in, which is a kind of neat little metaphor.
A terribly acted scene, I have to admit.
There's the metaphor, like the storm's coming in, right?
Yeah.
And then she's talking about, yes, the fact that she had this dream about, you know, everything turning into blood and stuff.
Yeah, I've had this dream about 5 or 6 times where I'm in a thunderstorm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's raining really hard. It sounds like pebbles when it hits the ground. I can hear it. I try to block out the sound with my hands, only it doesn't work. It just keeps getting louder and louder. And then the rain turns to blood.
And you can sense that there's an attempt to try to say, these are kids that, yes, are kind of dumb and just working a summer job, but there's a kind of sense of mortality is just going to force itself upon them. They are going to be forced to confront their mortality. And that's where you go, okay, with a better director, with a little bit better scripting. I don't think you have to go too profound. You don't have to try to be a statement movie or anything.
No, yeah.
You can play with this genre and you can do cool things with it. And I love that this film.
I'm not saying that that's not possible, you know. This film just doesn't do that.
But it's trying, and I admire it for trying. And I think
Is
I
it
love.
trying though? Is it really trying though?
I think it is.
I don't get. But who's trying? Is it the screenwriter trying? Is it the director trying? Because I don't get the sense that everyone's trying.
I think everyone's trying and everyone's failing. Well, we should talk about Betsy Palmer's performance.
Yeah.
She is committed.
Absolutely.
I was working the day that it happened, preparing meals. Here, I was the cook. Jason should have been watched every minute. He wasn't a very good swimmer.
It's actually fun because if you ever see interviews where she talks about this, she gave a whole. You asked like, was anybody trying? She's trying.
She had a whole backstory.
She created a
developed,
backstory.
yeah.
I mean, she has this whole idea of like what happened and how she got pregnant, and the guy left, and she had to go in, and they took her into this camp, and then she was cooking, and then he wasn't being paid attention to. I mean, it was just. It's really kind of fun to see. Like, I think she put more effort into the character than the writer, the director, everybody.
She probably didn't quite understand the kind of movie that was being made.
Well, she knew.
Showed up on set.
She knew exactly what she was getting into because her agent sent her the script and she said, "This is garbage," right?
Yeah.
And it was definitely. She was Betsy Palmer. She was in Mr. Roberts, right? And I think Gene Siskel gave. I don't know if he actually had the right information, but gave. Like her phone number for people to call and complain to her when he wrote the review of this. So it's actually funny because it's like the deliberate like troll review where he just specifically says, "Here's what everything that happens, and therefore don't go see this movie. I ruined it for you. Don't ever see this movie. It's terrible."
Well, I think some of the reviews of these films are pretty legendary, Siskel and Ebert.
Yeah.
But and it's hard for me to argue with them on some of the points they make. But I think I read that she was wanting to buy a new car or something, and that's why she took this film.
I'm sure.
She was
yeah.
paid like $1,000 a day or something.
Yeah,
for
but
10 days.
she worked a couple weeks, got $1,000 a day. It was worth it for her, right?
Yeah.
So people are being motivated by money on this movie. I don't deny that. But kudos to her. But it is like the most lame reveal ever. I mean, I remember just
It's
laughing.
pretty painful.
I remember laughing so hard. I'm just like, that's the killer. That's the killer that I was terrified as a little child.
Yeah, she can barely push a door open.
Yeah.
Let alone commit all these murders that
And
require
then
a fair amount of strength.
Yeah, and stage all the different people around, so that they can strategically follow the pattern. But it's fun. It's a fun movie. I just sometimes just the fact that they don't even get things quite right, like when she's decapitated at the end, and her head's coming off, which I know everybody kind of was really, oh my gosh, it's just so ugly and vile. But I just laugh at it because
it's pretty goofy.
Yeah, well, like the head's clearly like the machete's coming from this side, and her head is somehow already severed on this side and flying
she keeps
upward.
moving her hands for like 30 seconds after it.
So I mean, it's just kind of fun to see that kind of movie.
It's silly. I mean, ultimately, it's silly,
but it's trying to not just be silly, and that's what makes it work, is because I think that it's like the Ed Wood movies, where there's some level of not understanding your own incompetence.
Yeah, but
that makes it charming.
I just have a hard time buying that the people behind this movie were that earnest. You know, I think the motivation, it's hard for me to admire this film on any level, just knowing what the true motivation for making it probably was.
Well, but by that logic,
I don't mean to
can
sound
you
holier than thou, or to be like,
well,
okay,
Matt,
well,
movies
if it's morally
wanting to make
objectionable,
money.
then well, I understand that, but it's just like,
you can't admire like practically every movie that's being made. If that's like, you can't admire a James Bond movie. Like, why are they do?
I don't
Why is Daniel
admire
Craig
most
making
movies,
it?
actually.
Well, see, this is
Especially
right in your
nowadays.
wheelhouse then. So.
I don't know. It's a stretch. I mean, I can see what you're saying. I can see what you're going for, and you know, this. You could say this genre as a whole has kind of this philosophical sort of bent to it, saying that, you know, sin leads to death, kind of thing, right? This idea of premarital sex or whatever it is, you know, leads to indirectly these
Right.
people dying, or in the case
So
of this
that's
film, these
if
people
you're going off of
are
that,
targeted because of that.
that's obviously a lot of the way people kind of have tried to interpret the slasher film as kind of almost this very Reagan-esque morality of the 80s,
Sure.
right? Premarital sex,
And
drugs lead to death.
That dimension is interesting to me, you know, because I think that there is something to be said for that interpretation of it.
I don't know if that's accurate though,
Well, it may not be accurate, but
because our heroine,
the film certainly seems to have that message, and it's not a
This
message of
film
like
doesn't.
condemnation. It's just it's the motive of the killer, right? I mean, it's plays into her motive anyway.
yeah, her idea is that my son died, and I don't want anybody to have to go through that again,
Yeah,
right?
because these counselors that were
Right.
supposed to be watching him were off.
Right.
Having
But
a
like
good
you
time.
hear, like she burns down the camp. It's not just like I'm going after anybody who has sex, right? Because again, like if you think about it, because if it was this whole, if that interpretation that a lot of people bring to this movie or to other movies like it is correct, this film doesn't really work that way, because our lead has clearly had some kind of sexual relationship with the guy who's trying to start up the camp,
Yeah.
right?
You want to leave?
I don't know. I may have to go back to California to straighten something out.
Come on. Give me another chance.
So you can tell, like, okay, she's a younger woman, he's an older man, but the most rockingest and awesomest of outfits when we first meet him, with those shorts and the lack of a shirt. Like,
And he's wearing a sweater without wearing any shirt.
yeah, it's just like, whoa, man, that is just some priceless costume design right there.
It's very 70s.
You're just like, you go, man, that guy should be locked up. But you know,
It's a
it's
little
like,
creepy, yeah.
yeah, but you could tell, like, it's like she's not like the innocent virgin that you associate
no,
with
but
this
she
film.
doesn't partake in anything during the course of the movie, right?
Yeah, but neither
So
do a lot of the others who still wind up getting killed too.
Yeah, well, I guess they have that strip poker, but it doesn't follow completely logically. But I do think it's the film's attempt to have some level of depth to it.
Well, but I think the level of depth is trying to be a little bit different. It's this idea of an untimely death, and Cunningham has talked about that, right? That just you're kind of in those years, and I think, you know, this is a very accurate assessment, that when you're in your late teens, your early 20s, you do feel invulnerable, and death happens to other people. It doesn't happen to me, but it does happen to people, right? Accidents happen.
Yep.
We've obviously seen plenty of stories about massive, you know, shootings, things like that, where death just does visit itself upon people when they don't expect it. And this film, I think, is trying to get at that dimension of life. It just gets at it so very poorly. But nonetheless, I find it fascinating that they're trying, and that they're working to find that way to try to make this movie say something,
Yeah.
and they're utterly failing. And I kind of keep watching, like, what if you did this? And what if you did that? And what if that performance was just dialed in this way instead of that way, right? That's what I like about it.
It's an interesting, you know, thought experiment to try to kind of bring that extra dimension to it. But man, it's a stretch.
I mean, I think this movie is by no means. It's not good, but I mean, it still is fun, and I think I appreciate the fact that it is trying to go areas and it can't quite work, you know, and that's worthwhile.
Well, I mean, I can understand why people would like a horror film, you know, or a slasher film like this. You know, if you just you want simple scares and you want.
Well, I don't know if you'll get that now. Actually, one of my favorite reviews of this movie actually comes from The Simpsons. It's in the first Halloween episode, the Treehouse of Terror.
Maybe people were easier to scare back then. Oh, yeah. Like when you look at Friday the 13th Part 1. It's pretty tame by today's standards.
That's worth mentioning because there's a fair amount of gore in the film, but it's generally the kills are off screen.
You know, at the time, people talked about how vile it was and how violent it was, and you look at it and go, this does not strike me as being particularly bloody, gory.
Annie's death in the beginning and the
Kevin Bacon, that's the big one that everybody remembers.
That's about it, really.
Yeah, the arrow through the neck, you know, so Tom Savini's the makeup artist for this, and this was kind of a cool thing just because at that time.
It's impressive work.
Yeah, and well, I think that it was kind of neat because makeup was becoming known, right? I mean, this right after, say, well, it's the same year as like The Elephant Man. It's not that long after The Exorcist.
Fangoria was a very popular magazine at the time.
Yeah, so people really got into these things and started learning how they did some of the tricks. Some of the makeup you can definitely tell, I mean, especially in the extended cut where you get a little bit longer and you get the extra shot of Kevin Bacon's death, you can definitely tell, okay, it's a little, the skin doesn't quite match, you know.
Sure.
But still, in the original cut, they cut it a little shorter. It's even more effective. You go, oh, that's a good kill, you know. And I think again, that's probably why my mom was always furious of me for watching this movie. Because like, oh, that was a good kill. But
saying things like that, yeah, it doesn't endear you to your mother.
It's the kind of thing that you wind up in therapy for.
Yeah.
So, but I think that I do love that there is some craft in that. You know, the craft, they put the craft towards what needed to be there. And I would love to have seen how they could have just gone one little bit more, just a couple more rungs on the ladder.
But
and it's almost there.
That was not the ambition here, obviously. It was.
I don't know if it was or wasn't.
Making money.
That definitely is there.
Yeah.
But I think there's more to it than that. I just think that there was a little bit more ambition than anybody's willing to say about this movie, and it's kind of fun to see them not quite stick the landing. It's like when you're watching a really good gymnast at the Olympics who doesn't land it. You're just like, but it was really fun to watch, you know?